Hi. Thanks, hi. I'm Debbie, for those of you who don't know me. Sorry, I'll just get myself settled. And today I'll be looking into airbrushing and whether we need to slim down on altering images that are seen in the media. Feel free to tweet away. You can follow me at Deb Smith. Yeah, please follow me because I like some more followers. So just before I get into these swing of things, I'd just like to point out that in my abstract it says that I'm looking at images and advertising. However, this presentation will look at a broader range, so it include things like magazine covers or newspapers, editorials, music videos, etc., etc. Now, I do recognise that this is an ongoing debate. However, in February this year, Lancome and Julia Roberts had an advert banned. Since then, it seemed to spark the debate back into the spotlight, and since then politicians, journalists and consumers have all been weighing in on the argument. The main argument against airbrushing is the alleged effects that these images of unattainable perfection are having on young people, especially females. Numerous eating disorders are campaigning for them to be banned. On the other hand, however, Carol Malone, a very outspoken journalist, says that their problems cannot be fixed by banning airbrushing alone. She also points out the fact that through the coverage in the media and the sheer perfection that are these images, that we know that they're not real in the first place. So as future managers, should we be concerned with the potential damage and negative publicity our artists could receive, or is there no need for us to do anything at all? So I will give you a quick outline of this presentation. Firstly, I will define some of the frequently used terms that I'll be using. Then section 1 will look at the drawbacks of airbrushing. Section 2 will look at the arguments unopposed to airbrushing. Section 3 will have some suggestions to overcome the issue. And then finally, section 4, I'll finish with some final conclusions. So, some definitions. Airbrushing, a lot of people assume it's only kind of the complexion of an image. However, in the press, the term airbrushing is used in a more general sense, that it can mean anything from stretching a person, slimming them down, cutting off parts of the body. So for the purpose of this presentation, I will be using that meaning. And then when I say images, as mentioned, this can mean anything. They don't necessarily just have to be still pictures. They can mean music videos or news stories, etc., etc. And then when I say media, this is where these images are seen. So again, it can be your television, it can be your internet, it can be your magazines, anything where you see them. So we'll move on to section 1, which is the drawbacks of airbrushing. In April 2012 this year, 20-year-old Rachel Johnston from Warrington began putting together a petition. She either aims to ban airbrushing or create some sort of health warning to go alongside these images. Her motivation stems from the fact that when she was 13, she developed anorexia herself. And she openly admits that these images did not cause her anorexia. However, on BBC Breakfast this year, she said that at a time when you're getting possessed by the illness, your family can be telling you those pictures are not real, those pictures are fake. But when you get to that point, you don't believe anyone. She argues that these images that she was seeing of sheer perfection, she couldn't tell the difference when she was at one of her most vulnerable states, when she was in the illness, and she couldn't tell whether they're real or they're not, and essentially they were influencing and making her anorexia worse. Although one of the main arguments unopposed to airbrushing was the fact that we know that these images are not 100% real, what about those who are too young or not in the best mental state? How will they know whether these images are real or not? What about the pre-teen age, say 11 or 12, who may be too young to watch the news and understand it, or may not necessarily read newspapers themselves, but are still exposed to these airbrushed images in their magazines and on the television programs they watch? According to the eating disorder charity Beat, there are around 1.6 million sufferers in the UK aged 12 to 20. Both research promoted in both The Guardian and The Telegraph suggests that the size zero culture we live in is leading to eating disorders and negative body image. The Telegraph said, the figures reflected alarming trends in society, with young children internalising messages from celebrity magazines which idealise the thinnest figures. And The Guardian also supported this by saying, a number of factors combine to trigger eating disorders. Biology and genetics play a large part in the development, but so do cultural pressures, and body image seems to be influencing younger children much more over the past decade. So although they're not saying that these images are leading to anorexia necessarily, they are definitely adding to the cause. And then there's the issue of the models being used. Ralph Lauren used this model, where unairbrushed she looks like this. It's a very subjective argument, however I think that she looks of a nice healthy weight and she looks fine where she is. However, they airbrushed her to look like this in one of her adverts. As you can see, they gave her no hips, no waist, ridiculously slim thighs. So as adults, let alone children, how are we supposed to even know what images are real and what images are not that we are seeing? To move on to section 2, the arguments unopposed to airbrushing. These aren't arguments that are necessarily for airbrushing, they're just ones that are unopposed to them. So firstly, it can be a cost-effective tool and useful tool for photographers. It can help, say, stray hairs or fix any lighting problems that were not realised during the shoot. And then also, depending on your view of censoring, it can also be a useful tool for this. Jennifer Love Hewitt originally had this picture taken, an advert put together to advertise her show, The Client List. It was deemed inappropriate due to her ample cleavage and was not able to be published in the US television magazines. However, some airbrushing later, and it was to look like this. This advert was deemed a lot more suitable and was able to be published. Now I did mention about the Ralph Lauren model. However, some argue that the models being used in the first place are too thin. It could be argued that some of the adverts feature models who are unhealthy looking to begin with, and that although the majority of models make their career out of being tall and slim, which are two factors that not everyone can aspire to, H&M received a lot of bad press for using this picture of this model, who naturally was that slim. And then before this model, who was underweight in the first place, even before she's pictured, she goes through hair and makeup by professionals who use, they go through hair and makeup to emphasise their best looks, and then they are photographed in flattering lighting. So all these factors combine to demonstrate how even before the photos are taken, essentially it's arguable that the images are already unobtainable. There is the story of Jennifer Hawkins, who was a former Miss Universe. She appeared on the front of Australian Marie Claire, unairbrushed and completely unnatural. Now, this is essentially what campaigners such as Rachel Johnson have been calling for. However, this issue still received a lot of backlash. People were annoyed that they didn't go the extra step and use somebody who reflected a real woman, so essentially someone who was shorter, weighed more, and didn't make a career out of being beautiful. It raises the point that although there are numerous parties out there calling for images to be left untouched to tackle body confidence issues, when it does happen, it is still not enough. Is there a lesson for us artist managers out there? Essentially, having your artist pose on airbrushed is not a quick fix and will not satisfy all protesters out there. Furthermore, after the controversy this edition caused, Hawkins was dropped from her next cover, which was Women's Day magazine. So it wasn't just a short-term effect, it did affect her career later on as well. finally, section 3 are some possible ways to overcome the issue. The Girl Guides in 2010 and Rachel Johnson, as I've already mentioned, have both started petitions with suggestions that health warnings should be in place to allow people to know that an image has been altered. Those 4 health warnings are suggesting it may be most beneficial to the younger people and those who may not necessarily hear all the controversy over the airbrushing in the news but are still possibly influenced by it. However, as with most suggestions that have come to light over the issue, there are drawbacks. For example, how do we measure what has been airbrushed? If a background in an image has been airbrushed, do we need to include this as well? So it does. So the purpose of that was to identify that there will still be drawbacks, and many protesters out there who still may not necessarily be happy with the use of health warnings. There will definitely be a need for boundaries and guidelines if this practice is to be put in place. So it's not going to be happening, perhaps not in the short term. Now, some of you may remember last year that Sarah Johnson discussed some of the pressures surrounding anorexia, especially in the fashion industry. The images of anorexic models and then the images of airbrushing arguably have some of the same influences surrounding them. Well, in the last fortnight, Vogue magazines have announced their new health initiative surrounding the use of underweight and underage models in their magazine. This 2-minute video explains it and what they're hoping to do.
Vogue magazine is changing the rules with their brand new health initiative that is bringing to light the unhealthy problems with modeling. The popular fashion magazine unveiled the new 6-point pledge in June's British Vogue, but the declaration is set to take place across the board for all 19 versions of the mag. There's been years and years of scrutiny on magazines and the modeling industry for portraying unrealistic goals to women with excessive photoshopping and retouching. So it's a wonder that it's taken so long for someone to take some real action. In the 6-point pledge, the 19 editors-in-chief agreed to number 1, not knowingly working with models under the age of 16 or who appear to have an eating disorder. The 6 points go on to include checking IDs when girls come into auditions for a shoot with Vogue magazine and not allowing modeling agents to knowingly send the magazine a girl who is under their age mark. They go on to pledge that they will create a mentoring program where wiser models will teach the younger girls the importance of being a healthy model, creating industry-wide awareness of the problems in the modeling world. Vogue even goes as far to challenge designers to change the way they view their sample sizes, encouraging them to take a look at the damage they cause by having, quote, unrealistically small sizes that limit the range of women who can be photographed. And last but not least, they promise to be ambassadors for the message of healthy body image, thus putting Vogue well on the way to being an ambassador of change in the modeling industry. And I want to know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button so you're in the know about all things fashion.
So, as mentioned in the video, it has taken the fashion industry a very long time to reach this point and introduce this sort of code of conduct. Unfortunately, it does still appear to be baby steps, and the terminology used does leave a lot open to be interpreted. However, my point in showing you this video was the suggestion that perhaps in future years Vogue could extend this remit and to include the use of airbrushing. At present, this code of conduct does not include anything about airbrushing, but could a similar code of conduct potentially lead to other publications in the industry following suit? And Vogue are major players in the publishing industry, so I think it is definitely a possibility. However, let us not forget about the regulations that are already set by the Advertising Standards Authority. Now, the ASA are the regulator for complaints against advertising across the media in the UK. They operate with a common sense approach which expects advertisers to act responsibly and follow their guidelines that are also known as the CAP codes. Consumers can complain to the ASA, and then these complaints are then adjudicated with the results being published on the website. Results can lead to adverts having to be removed like completely, or just changed slightly so the complaint is fixed. The issue of airbrushing is not covered in their CAP code. However, the closest section that they have is section 3.11, which says, marketing communications must not mislead consumers by exaggerating the capability or performance of a product. Now, at the beginning of this presentation, I told you about the Julia Roberts and Lancome advert, which was banned, which was this one here. And then there was also the Twiggy and Olay advert, which was this one. Now, these were both banned, and it may appear that they were banned because of their use of airbrushing. However, it's important to understand that they were simply banned because the product's use were exaggerated. So the ASA at present do not do anything unless it's the product that is being called into disrepute. So, as with the Vogue Health Initiative, could the ASA's remit be extended to include the use of airbrushing in the adverts? So instead of just focusing on the product, could they look at the advert as a whole and be open to complaints on this issue? I did think about suggesting some sort of regulating body for all the images in the media. However, I quickly thought that this would probably not work. By the time a complaint has been made about an image, say at the front cover of a magazine, and then this has been adjudicated and a result has been printed, essentially due to this short cycle that newspapers and magazines have, it would be pointless because it wouldn't be on the shelf anymore, so there'd be nothing there for them to ban. However, could some sort of governance lead to the industry acting more responsibly? Then I've looked at the market and I've looked at the regulating body, but can consumers do anything to help this issue? A number of different parties have been trying to evoke change through the use of campaigns. I've already told you about Rachel Johnson and briefly mentioned the Girl Guides, but more recently, more and more people are speaking out on the topic. Joe Swinson of the Liberal Democrats is campaigning for airbrushing to be banned and is speaking out in the press and complaining to the ASA that airbrush adverts aimed at children need to be banned. She says, today's unrealistic idea of what is beautiful means that young girls are under more pressure now than they were even 5 years ago. We need to help protect children from these pressures, and we need to make a start by banning airbrushing in adverts banned at them. The Liberal Democrats as a whole are also campaigning for the use of health warnings, as mentioned earlier, for those adverts aimed at adults, so that we all know to what extent an image has been airbrushed. And then another campaign that some of you may have heard of is that of 13-year-old Julia Bloom. She has been protesting outside the Hearst offices in the USA, who are responsible for publication 17 magazine. Now, 17 magazine is a magazine that's aimed at teenagers in the US, and it still features airbrushed images. Julia Bloom argues that girls are perfect the way they are, and there should be no need for retouched images being featured in them. However, all these protests are great for raising awareness, but is it likely that the industry is going to change simply from consumers protesting? And look at how long it took Vogue to introduce their health initiative and how many people campaigned against that in the recent years. It appears to me that if the use of airbrushing is changed, then it needs to come from the industry themselves. For example, numerous celebrities have posed on airbrush to make a stance against airbrushing. For example, there's this one of Kate Blanchett, Brad Pitt, Kate Moss, Jessica Simpson, and Leonardo DiCaprio. However, as you can see, all these are magazine covers. So not to be deceived, it does not seem that the industry is changing just yet. It appears that the act of not being airbrushed is being used as a marketing tool for headlines for the magazines, as the next edition will then come out and it'll be the perfect airbrushed front cover once again. In order for the issue of airbrushing to be tackled, it needs to be not made a headline of, and until that happens, only then will it become the norm. And finally, to conclude, I'll just recap on the original question. which was, do we need to slim down on altering images published in the media? Annoyingly, this is a very hard question to answer. As can be seen, there are issues surrounding the use of airbrushing, but it's not easy to have some quick fix that makes all parties involved happy. As artist managers, should we be concerned about taking an ethical stance? However, arguably, taking an ethical stance can come at an economical cost for our artists. Taking an ethical stance would mean that our artists would be limited with who they could work with in the future. And then, as managers, should we not want the best for our artists, which again, arguably, which is this? Is it taking an ethical stance, or is it earning them money? What do we do as managers when recently there is a lot of hype and bad press concerning airbrushing, and there's been a lot of exposure of the original photos, such as this one of Madonna, which, as you can see, she looks quite rough. So exposing this difference in the airbrushed pictures to the consumers is obviously creating a lot more awareness around them. Overall, to answer the original question, I do think there needs to be a change in the way which airbrushing is used on images, especially for those aimed at children and young adults. I don't think it's fair to put these images in front of young influential people, easily influenced people, and essentially tell them that this is what people look like. For adults, it may be different. I mean, I've recognised over the past few years I am becoming a lot more aware that these images aren't real. But as managers, should we be considering how our artists' actions are being interpreted by their fan base, and is there any way in which we can compromise perfection for their well-being? Thank you very much.